House of the Dragon Episode 7 Ending Explained. With the episode titled Driftmark, we saw all matters occur on the island or at sea, which was rather appropriate considering the title of the episode. Following Laena's death, the entirety of the runtime spanned over the course of a day, which was a first for the show. With conflict, division, and with it looking like the king is on his last legs, all preparations for war are being prepared, despite nothing actually being declared. So with that, I thought I'd recap, break down, and explain all that there was to take away from the episode. So let's get into it. Here is House of the Dragon Episode 7 Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. The episode started where it finished, and that was by a Velaryon child going out to sea. We saw Laena's funeral taking place, which occurred following her commanding Vhagar to burn her at the end of the previous episode, due to her childbirth going wrong and her wanting to die a dragon rider's death. All of the family were present, and you could see that it was impacting certain individuals more than others. The likes of Corlys, Rhaenys, Laena's children, Laenor and Daemon were all mourning her loss, whereas it looked as though Aegon and Aemond didn't really care to be there. She was being buried at sea due to the fact that Velaryons hold the sea as Targaryens do fire. It was following this where we saw an interesting scene take place. All branches of the family were split around the space in separate corners, and we had the king almost centered within it, where he was turning, splitting between Rhaenyra, Daemon, Allicent and Corlys, showing the divide that's within his mind and the struggle that he faces despite having to deal with the illness that's killing him. Rhaenyra and Daemon laid eyes upon each other for the first time in a long while, most likely since her wedding, and this whole scene, despite containing conversations with others, it was building up to them encountering each other later on. We had Laena making one of her brief appearances where there was a focus on her speaking with a spider. She stated, "Hands turn loom, spool of green, spool of black, dragons of flesh, weaving dragons of thread." Here it's most likely a reference to the divide and impending war between the greens and the blacks. Dragons of flesh meaning both sides have dragon blood within them. Weaving dragons of thread, they're both Targaryens, so I think this is a nod to what's upcoming. We got to see Aemond and the fact that he's far more prepared to go above and beyond for the duty of his house, especially when compared to Aegon. Aegon is the eldest, has a dragon, and with the attitude and mindset that he holds, it feels as though there is a sense of entitlement there. Whereas Aemond has to do the work to prove himself, especially considering that he didn't hold a dragon. This was until we saw that he was able to bond with Vhagar in the episode. The egg he was given at birth hadn't hatched, so he was without a dragon, and we saw that it was something that he was mocked for. And just like what happened to Laena in bonding with Vhagar when she was slightly older, we've seen the same thing now happened with Aemond. This was one of the first times that we got to really see Vhagar, and the sheer size of her is impressive to see. She looks like a formidable force, and as Otto Hightower mentioned at the end of the episode, the power that the Greens will hold in having Vhagar far outweighs the price that he paid for it in the loss of an eye. Vhagar is the largest dragon in the kingdom, and with that comes an immense amount of power. We saw King Viserys approach Daemon and try to reconcile and provide comfort to him following Laena's death. But the bitterness that Daemon holds over the privilege that the king has is something that's extremely present still. He didn't want to be handed something by him, and he walked off rejecting his offer. Otto Hightower returned this week as Hand of the King following Lionel's death, and we saw Daemon utter the words, "No matter how fat the leech grows, it always wants another meal." This was alluding to the fact that over the years, Otto has slowly been sucking the blood and life out of the king, and meddling behind his back. And now he's back for more. It was a great line that perfectly summed up the snake that is Sir Otto. Claiming the throne is something that was, as always, ever so present, with Otto lining it up for Aegon, Rhaenyra being heir, but it also coming to light in this week's episode the resentment and want for power that Lord Corlys Velaryon holds, and the bitterness over his wife Rhaenys being overlooked twice. This was something that Rhaenys had put to bed and didn't seek out anymore, but it was present within Corlys's mind, showing that even though he's aware that Rhaenyra's children are not Laenor's and do not hold Velaryon blood, he still wants Driftmark to go to Viserys instead of Daemon's children, as names are what get remembered, and with them likely marrying others from a different house, they may change their name and the Velaryons would be forgotten. One key thing that occurred in this episode, and something that was a main focus, was the reunion of Daemon and Rhaenyra. There's been tension on screen since we saw them in episode 1 of the show, where he gifted her the necklace. Rhaenyra expressed how she wanted to be with Daemon, and we saw them share an intimate evening on the beach, which ultimately led to their wedding, which was what we saw at the end of the episode, forming a bond that would essentially inflict fear upon all throughout Westeros. They united like Aegon the Conqueror and his two sisters did, pure dragon blood that wouldn't be able to be questioned, like we've seen Rhaenyra face over the past few years with the legitimacy of her sons. We saw that it meant that Laenor had to be killed in order for this to be possible, but we saw that Laenor actually managed to escape being killed due to his lover informing him. He ultimately ended up at sea like his sister was at the start of the episode, leaving Driftmark for good. However, with Daemon and Rhaenyra behind it, it does make me wonder if he's going to change sides or if he's just going to keep his head down following the assassination attempt. I do think that there is a possibility that Rhaenyra wouldn't do that to Laenor, and it could have all been a setup. Rhaenyra and Daemon both respected Laenor, so I think it could have all been planned out. Especially when Laenor said earlier on how he couldn't split between serving Rhaenyra and also going off and having fun, meaning that he had to choose one. So I think Rhaenyra made the decision for him. Especially with Daemon mentioning of there being a place where it didn't matter what house she came from, and with Daemon demanding that there were witnesses, meaning that both Laenor and his lover could live there without question. With Laenor being perceived as dead, the very idea that Rhaenyra would be behind it is something of a rumour that they want to spread, to assert the power and fear that she wants to hold. Rulers lead with their people fearing them, and that's the approach that Rhaenyra wants to take. This is something that Viserys has been unsuccessful in doing. People do not fear him, and he chooses to be blind to all that goes on around him as he doesn't want to tarnish the name of his daughter. It's clear to see that he cares more for Rhaenyra than he does his other 3 children that he's had with Alicent, and I think that's because she's the last remaining thing that he has of his late wife Aemma, who died in childbirth. We even saw the king call Alicent Aemma by accident, showing that his illness is now impacting his mind as well as his physical state, but it also showed the prominence in his mind that Aemma holds even after all of these years. The standout scene in this episode occurred inside of Driftmark following Aemond confronting Jacaerys, Lucerys, Baelor, and Rhaena. We saw Aemond referring to the fact that they were not Laenor's sons, which erupted in a fight between them and ultimately leading Jacaerys to taking Aemond's eye. This then erupted in the hall where the king was looking for answers and was clearly more on the side of his daughter than his own son that lost an eye. You could sense the outrage from Alicent as she felt as though her son losing an eye was almost overlooked and was going to go unpunished, to the point where she essentially lashed out, held up the Valyrian blade where it was held over a flame like we've seen in several episodes of the show, where the mentioning of Aegon's prophecy comes to light, and she slashed Rhaenyra. Alicent's true colours were shown in front of everybody, and if anything, it showed that if the king wasn't there then all hell would have broken loose. Well, even more than what it did, highlighting that the moment that the king does die, war will most certainly erupt. The divide in the family is clear, and it looks as though in next week's episode, the fight for the Iron Throne will begin, with Rhaenyra having Daemon and the Velaryons, Alicent having Sir Criston, Otto and Larys. It's not going to be a clean fight, but with Otto already stating that they play an ugly game, I suppose it's already dirty. This episode provided tension, development, outstanding performances, and an episode that I didn't really want to finish. With only 3 episodes left, we're drawing ever closer to the end of the season, and I can't wait to see how it's going to go. So, there you have it, House of the Dragon Episode 7 Ending Explained. If you want to see more videos on House of the Dragon, such as endings explained, theories and predictions, and character breakdowns, then click on the I button. Or alternatively, you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. If you'd like to give me a show or movie that you'd like me to review, then head over to my Twitter, @BrainPilot_, and tweet me what show or movie you'd like me to review next. And finally, if you'd like to see what I rate the latest movies that don't quite make the cut to getting a dedicated video, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. It's where I rate the latest releases in real time. What did you think of episode 7? Leave a comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.